Hey there, APHUG team. Welcome back. Let's go ahead and dive into part 2 of our DTM video lecture. Just to review, last time we introduced the DTM as the demographic transition model, and we took a look at stage 1 and stage 2, which is looking at our first our primitive and hunting and gathering societies, and then stage 2 is more of our agricultural societies. So let's go ahead and take a look at the screen, which is stage 3, which can be classified as our later industrial or more industrialized societies. Here we have more of a moderate growth of population because we see a steady decline in the crude birth rate. So the crude birth rate finally begins to react to the fact that the crude death rate is declining, and more families are choosing to have less children. We know now, again, going through stage 2, that we have a stable food supply due to agriculture and farming. So that's able to sustain a population, especially thinking about the children. Children are living longer, they're not susceptible to diseases, and that's increasing the size of the family. So really stage 3, I want to highlight that stage 3 classifies, we have different lifestyle changes. And this kind of ties to our discussion of development. One of the reasons why we explored development before population is to understand that in stage 3 we have economic and social changes. Now, as economies begin to grow and begin to change, we see that with more and more money, people's views of society are going to change, and what they value is begin to change. So for example, in this particular stage, at the end of stage 2, we talked about the fact that more and more people were moving to cities. In stage 3, we have more people living in cities, and for example, one of the changes as far as economic is more people living in the cities. Now, I want you to think about this. If more people are moving to the cities, that's going to put a strain as far as resources and just overall space. Remember, if I'm having a family of 5, 6, 7, 8 children, and all of a sudden I see now the economy is changing, and again we're now moving into industrial times, we're moving to cities which are near the factories, it's going to be very difficult for me to have that big of a family. Number one, it's cramped and crowded, and number two, more children, more expensive. So families are choosing to have less children. Now, the major role of this change, of course, we want to highlight that women play a very important factor in terms of population. We see that there's a greater emphasis on women, greater emphasis on empowerment, and that women really, again, are given more options. Now, options, of course, the fact that they can choose not to have as many children. Women have the choice, for example, for more birth control options. And women overall, of course, were required to work in the factories, and we see later in stage 3, more and more women are choosing to focus on their careers. So in stage 3, we see, in the later part of stage 3, the emphasis on the middle class, and the fact that more and more families really want to try to achieve that standard. When you think about nowadays, even in today's standard, how expensive children are, it kind of makes sense that people during the stage begin to make choices to have smaller families. We see, for example, if education becomes an important factor in stage 3 that we mentioned before, if families have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children, it's very difficult if you want to try to put them through school or give them opportunities. It's also, very difficult to think about families trying to provide children with experiences. When we look at later on, again, vacations, or think about your parents, they paid for your soccer lessons or your violin practice. If you're investing time, energy, resources into children, more and more families are going to try to cap that and again have a smaller family which they can devote their resources to. So we definitely see in stage 3 again a steep decline in terms of population. We see that the crude death rate is pushed as low as they can go. So again, the death rate down here. But remember, we can never necessarily achieve 0 because such is life. We always have people that are going to exit this world. We're always going to have a death rate. You can't cheat death. So again, if you look at this screen right here, this kind of space, this gap, this is actually where we have our population growth. So it's kind of easy to see if this is the CDR versus the CBR. We see again the population growth is kind of dwindling by the end of stage 3. Another thing that I want to highlight here in stage 3, unlike stage 2 where we could really classify it as more children are surviving, in stage 3 this is where we have more of the elderly surviving, because by the end of stage 3 this is where again we have more advancements in science, in technology, in medicine. So for example, now we're able to extend the life of the elderly population. Think about cancer treatments or heart attack. So those types of things also kind of factor in the population in stage 3. So here's a graph just to kind of follow up on that point. So for example, it says measles mortality in the U.S. since 1900. So again, you can see that kind of up and down, but for the most part right here, the measles vaccination introduced. And now again, we see that definitely decline in terms of how many people are dying for something like the measles. Also TB mortality, tuberculosis, somebody maybe even gotten TB test. So now we have vaccination and treatment. So when you think about, again, the skyrocketing levels up here in the 1900s and how that kind of tapers off right down here. So kind of a visual in terms of what we see, again, medicine and scientific study improves our life expectancy. Alright, so let's go ahead and summarize, again, not to necessarily be copied down, but just to kind of understand or summarize where we've just been looking at that transition into stage 3. So we definitely mentioned that in this stage, again, societies become more urbanized. We've already mentioned declining death. Increase in urbanization is going to change the traditional values about having children. And again, city living raises the cost of having dependents, so that's definitely a factor as families are deciding how many children to have. We definitely notice the influence of women. Women are very influential and again are very empowered in terms of childbearing decisions. We see increase of education. Also here again, I didn't mention earlier, changes the value placed on motherhood. It isn't necessarily the sole measure of a woman's status, so women are feeling more comfortable to have less children, maybe not having any children, delaying having children later in life, and more if maybe perhaps are focusing on working on their careers or entering the workforce. And then we also mentioned improved contraception technology, availability of birth control, so this also plays a factor. Here's another graphic to take a look at. So it says fertility rates and female literacy. We talked about, for example, in your FRQ for Unit 2, the power of women enrolled in secondary schools and women going to schools, girls getting an education, the power that has in terms of population. So you can see right here again, as the literacy increases, literacy, we're talking about women that can read and write. We definitely see the trend is that there's a decline in terms of births. And in this case over here, increase in availability and use of modern contraception. So this is going all the way back to the 1950s. And you can see identified right here, Latin America, East Asia, South Asia, and Africa. All right, and then last but not least today, we want to go ahead and hit stage 4. Stage 4, we see a very low growth rate, or maybe even 0. And this is where finally we see that we're back to low growth rate and where the CBR and the CDR meet again. It's agreed by most geographers, a stage 4 is kind of post-industrial, meaning it's more the more modern countries. So in your mental map, think of countries in Western Europe, for example. Also Japan is classified into a stage 4. Some would argue borderline even up into that stage 5 category. More modern countries, we're talking about more modern technology, modern societies. So during stage 4, a country also moves away from its reliance on industry, and we're moving more to a service-based type economy. More people are involved in selling products than actually the production. So for example, if we're talking about more people are selling or fixing cars than actually manufacturing them. In that case, again, there's lots of factors that will determine the success of the economy. Now, during stage 4, children become even more of an economic liability and cost. And again, in stage 4, we see a bigger role of women have more access to birth control options and also limiting the number of children being born. So for example, when we watched our video in class looking at population in Japan, we saw the testimony that more and more Japanese women are choosing to not have children or delaying that option because they're more focused on their careers. Now, also interesting here in stage 4, on contrast, we also have what geographers would call in stage 4, we have a counter-urbanization, which is a little different. In our earlier stages, we had people moving to the cities for the factories and the jobs. But in stage 4, more of a post-industrial society, this is where we have people that are choosing to move out of the cities, moving to, example, for the suburbs, because now they're looking for more space. They're looking for that house with a big yard and a white picket fence, and they want safe conditions. They don't want to be in the inner city. So more of that migration out of the cities is something we can recognize in stage 4. Finally, I put on the screen just to again highlight, we also have geographers classified that there is an additional stage. Now this is kind of the hypothesis, this is kind of the prediction. It's not in your classic DTM model, but I want you to be familiar with it. And in stage 5, we have more of a negative population. So much of Europe now or soon will be in a population decline, or we call what is called a graying population. When we start talking about population policies, this can be very significant in terms of how the country is going to address resources, and again, how it's going to encourage or discourage different population policies. All right, also on the screen right now, I just put a slide of different countries. So it says key population indicators for selected countries. So you can kind of begin to, assess our mental map where we have countries, for example, that are classified in stage 2 of the DTM. And again, if you look at those numbers, understanding the fact that we have that extreme birth rate and the death rate. Also, again, stage 3. For example, Brazil was one of our BRICS, or our newly industrialized countries, kind of on the rise. It's classified in that stage 3. We have the United States, which is classified in stage 4, countries like Australia, Canada, and then again, in this case, Eastern European countries, we have classification of declining population. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for today, and we'll go ahead and use this video lecture, of course, to connect to your module. So make sure, again, evidence of going back through and adding annotations, notes, questions, highlighting, and evidence the fact that you're building the video lecture and making use of the resources, class readings, and of course your textbook. All right, folks, I'll see you back in class.